What did a professional say or do that made you immediately lose trust in them? A plumber in the middle of a job that had to drive back to the shop to get a part that was pretty basic, and then charged for the time it took to do that, and then installed it incorrectly, and then returned a week later to fix the mistake and asked what idiot installed it that way, and then installed it wrong in an entirely new way. When the roofer didn't bring a ladder. Oh, you have your roof on top of the house? That's gonna take specialist equipment. Veterinary clinic. So what's wrong with your cat? Was holding a rabbit. Her face got really red afterwards, most likely a brain fart. To her excuse, my wife tried buying cat litter and cat food for the rabbit, until I reminded we had a rabbit. I had repeatedly gone to my GP about this nagging pain in my arm. He did some blood work to check for a vitamin deficiency, and sent me for an X-ray which didn't show anything. He then decided my pain must be because I was an anxious female. On my last visit I mentioned I had also been struggling with breathing properly, and had some chest pain and was starting to get quite concerned. He said, "You're just anxious. But what do you have to be anxious about? You have a husband with a good job," and sent me on my way with a prescription for Zoloft. 2 days later I was in the ER being diagnosed with a pulmonary embolism, and now I have a new doctor. It would be good if you could follow up with the old doctor to teach them about their bad behavior or file a complaint of some kind for the safety of future patients, if you're able to do so. I did actually go back and tell him what had happened, and his excuse was that he didn't want to run too many tests in case my insurance didn't cover it. As it was, insurance ended up forking our insane amounts for time spent in intensive care, CT scans, and a heparin drip, so this logic was somewhat flawed. When I was a teenager in high school, I really wanted to apply for an astronomy camp program that summer, and you needed a letter of recommendation from a math or science teacher. My higher grade was in chemistry, so I asked her. She said she would, but be aware that she'd have to say I don't always focus on my work as I should. I said fine, that was true, worked really hard on the rest of the application, and got in. Ran to school in excitement to thank my teacher for her letter, and she couldn't hide her look of utter astonishment, and I realized what was up. A few months later, when at that camp, I nonchalantly asked the director, "She wrote me a bad letter, didn't she?" He immediately pulled me aside to say yes. It was so bad that it was a full page saying terrible things about my character and scholarship, so he knew to discount it but wanted to let me know. Which was in fact good to know, because I had AP chemistry with her the next year, and she kept doing stuff like getting me sent to the principal's office for a B at the quarter. That still bothers me a bit to this day. I was your classic bright but bored kid and was obsessed with astronomy, and any educator worth their salt knows a kid who can't get good grades in chemistry class can thrive at a summer program. If she didn't want to write me a letter, one can just say no. But spending all that time writing a bad one? Pretty low thing to do to a teenager. My father had just taken his own life. I was 14. I really struggled to get through full weeks at school. My attendance was shocking. My psychiatrist said to my mom, "Don't worry, she doesn't need an education. She's pretty." This fueled my mom to get me right back into school. King love my mom. The OL reverse psychology. That psychiatrist is a secret genius. I was looking to hire an editor for one of my books last year. She corrected my grammar in the email I sent her quite politely, I have to say. I think she thought it was some kind of audition piece, but she was just factually wrong about the mistake. I think it was use of a colon instead of a semicolon. When I sent her a link to a couple of web pages that showed that actually the way I typed it was correct, she doubled down, got extremely snippy with me, and basically came back with, "You're hiring me to do a job, so I know better than you. Bitch, I've done your job in the past. I know editing is a skill and deserves respect, but I'm paying you because I don't want to do it, not because I can't do it." Either way, she didn't get hired. Finding a decent editor is hard, man. I broke my arm and went to an orthopedic office. I didn't like them from the first appointment because I had an appointment, and they made me wait for about 2 hours. Then they had their secretary take my past medical history, which is extremely complex, in the waiting room. On a follow-up appointment, the tech removed my cast. PA came in to assess my arm, and went to my non-broken arm. Assessed strength and range of motion and swelling and told me it seemed to be healing nicely. I told her that's great, since that one was never broken. Once she finished repeating the process on the arm that actually was broken, she sent the tech in to recast my arm. I had to stop the tech from casting my non-broken arm. On my appointment paperwork she wrote that she recommended I take ibuprofen for pain relief. That was exactly 2 sentences after where it stated NSAIDs, like ibuprofen, cause life-threatening airway swelling in me. Same office wanted to charge me $50 every visit to sign a form that was literally one checkbox saying if I was cleared or not for full duty at work. One checkbox. No research required. I never went back. I dislocated my ankle and went to the hospital in an ambulance. When I got there I was assessed and sent for an x-ray. I got onto the bed and the tech started lining up the x-ray over my knee, so I told her I dislocated my ankle, not my knee, and she said that the chart said it was my knee. I replied that I'm pretty fucking certain that the fucked up foot that's hanging off is the problem, and that if she doesn't believe me then to double check with the doctor because my knee is fine. She just kept repeating that if the chart says it's my knee then that's what has to be x-rayed, and she's unwilling to double check. So after a 2-hour wait for an x-ray I go back to the doctor with pictures of my knee, and he's confused as fuck, so goes to the x-ray tech and asks what the fuck she's playing at. She gives him the speech about how she just x-rays what it says in the chart. So he proceeds to chew her out, saying if she's getting clearly conflicting information then she has a duty to double check to make sure she's doing the right thing. He said people make mistakes and this was an easy one to catch, but she's too much of a moron with no common sense to do anything about it. She was so pissed at me as she took the x-ray of my ankle, saying I should have insisted she double check and I should have refused to do the x-ray until she did. The woman was completely incompetent. I asked a doctor about medicine for a condition, and she told me all about the power of faith and how it's so helpful to her. Last visit. Look, faith is an incredibly important part of people's lives and I have no problem with that, but when I'm paying for a doctor's visit I want some goddamn doctoring. With actual science and shit. My mother went to a doctor for a spinal problem after a bike crash, and the doc spent 10 minutes moving a buffalo bone around her. A real doctor. I saw a doctor after a mental breakdown who told me I had anxiety, and then asked me if I had tried not being anxious. I think I saw him as well, or someone trained at the same school. Regarding my ongoing severe depression, have you tried being cheerful? I went to my GP to get a prescription for birth control. I suggested an IUD may be something I want because I'm very forgetful and pills did not work out in the past. She refused to prescribe an IUD because I was a virgin and she didn't want to take my virginity away by inserting an IUD. Currently looking for a new GP. I know 3 women who have never had a proper gynecological exam because they are protecting their virginity. It is bizarre. I do know an ovarian cancer survivor who only survived because she moved to a different state. No one would remove her ovaries because she was only 32 and might want more children. She already had 2 kids and wanted them removed so she could raise the kids who were already here. She uprooted from MI to CA without a job just to have a shot at living. I have an acquaintance who was just diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. Doctor told her she needed to decide now if she wanted to try for another kid. Like what the fuck? It's stage 4. If she has a kid, 9 months, it ain't gonna be her raising it. Told my old therapist I didn't want to see her anymore, and she told me that without her I wouldn't even have any friends. Marked the wrong wrist before surgery. Wait, what? What kind of surgery was this? Did the surgery go through or was the mistake caught in time? I asked her, why are you marking that wrist? Wouldn't it make sense to mark the one you are going to perform the surgery on? She replied with the following, oh wow, I'm happy our patient is paying attention. Of course we need to mark the other wrist. You can imagine I was not feeling too good about that. It was a doctor at a pediatric hospital. I was 16 and suffering from joint pain, undiagnosed Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, not rare, but not super common either. The doctor came in and asked to see how flexible I was. He pulled on my arm and it dislocated from the shoulder pretty easily, ow, but that wasn't the bad part. The bad part was that he immediately laughed, and then ran outside to call in other doctors and nurses with, hey, look what this one can do! They all ran in and he proceeded to, without asking me, locate and dislocate my arm repeatedly while giggling. It was mortifying and demeaning and I got in the car and cried afterwards. I didn't get my diagnosis there despite having every hallmark of EDS. All he did was embarrass and hurt me for a laugh. I didn't just stop trusting him, I stopped trusting basically every member of the medical profession, since all those people just came in to stare at and laugh at me. I got my diagnosis a few months later from a much kinder, more gentle doctor, who was horrified when I told this story. High school guidance counselor. Talking to her about what schools I was applying to. Me, so I'm looking at these state city schools as my backups, by MPSTLY looking at this private school because they sent me. She scoffs, interrupting me. Honey, your family could never afford a private school. Me. A letter offering a full academic scholarship. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.